think it's only fair to discuss the evidence in favour of Tord being a clone before discussing any evidence against it. So when he first meets the boys, Tord says hi to his old friends, but seems confused when Ed tries to hug him. He spends the rest of the episode making Tom angry while reliving their old adventures, and the twist is that it was all a ruse to gain access to his old lab and, by extension, his giant robot. He shoots at Tom, kills John, dismisses his friendship, and says that he wants to take over the world. Why would he do such a thing? Well, maybe this is not Tord. He could be a doppelganger. Spares is an episode all about the main characters being cloned, and it's established that there are several rejected clones who look and or act differently to the rest of them. At least one of them is obsessed with guns, and one of them gets shot in the cheek. Could this explain Tord's bandage in the end? Most of the clones are killed at the end of the episode, but one clone of Matt is shown to have survived. If that clone survived, there's no telling how many other clones are out there. One of the more violent Tords may have survived and formed the villainous organization we see in the Legacy, while the quote-unquote real Tord is still out there following his dreams of making it in the big city. When I asked my subscribers why they might believe this theory, I got over 100 responses, all of which were very useful when making this video, so genuinely thank you for taking your time to respond if you did. I read through every comment and there were plenty of trends. Lots of talk on the voice and accent, as well as the dialogue and speech patterns of the new Tord. I won't really be talking very much about these differences because honestly they were kind of unavoidable. With a new voice actor who also isn't Norwegian and new writers working in a different time, there was no way of perfectly replicating what came before. The same could be said for Tom nowadays, for instance. Interestingly though, in over 100 comments, there were very few people trying to link the end to Spares in any way. The bandage on Tord's face was by far the most common one, and even that can be explained away quite easily. It falls away in the climax and all we see is a scar, nothing like the bullet wound his clone receives. It's also in a different place on the face and kills the clone in question, so that's another nail in the coffin. Occam's razor says the scar is just a scar that was probably obtained in the time it took to get a £1.5 million bounty over his head. A bit of character design that foreshadowed his true nature. So let's be real for a second, if you watch Spares in search of foreshadowing, then you won't find any. The episode was not written with the knowledge that Tord would leave the show and then come back as a supervillain. It wasn't written with any continuity in mind. For example, a Matt clone did survive, but he was also never seen again. That was a gag at the end of an episode that had no effect on anything afterwards. There's only ever been one Matt. If in some alternate timeline Matt was the bad guy in the end, or there were two Tords right here, then yeah, that would be pretty hard evidence, but that's just not the case. But the most commonly cited reason for why these two Tords cannot be the same person, by far, is bad writing. According to proponents of this theory, Tord in the end isn't written the same way as he was prior to 2008. That's all that matters. He could just as easily be an evil twin, or a villain in disguise, or a Tord from another dimension, but the clone idea makes the most sense because there's an entire episode about it. Even when there's no firm evidence that he's a clone, he must be a different person because Tord's actions are so out of character. I would contend that no, is not really out of character at all. We all know that violence was always a part of Tord's character. He's played a game of paintball using real guns, he loved using weapons in the army, and he attempted to invade a country in an alternate timeline where Ed wasn't there to stop him. It's not a stretch to say that he tried to take over the world because he's done it before. More importantly, Tord has already tried to kill his friends. More than once. The very first video on the eddsworld YouTube channel, the very first one, is Tord's adventure. The adventure in question is Tord's quest to kill Ed for sharing an embarrassing image. The entire video is Tord trying to kill one of his friends. And as for the rest of Tord's episodes, well, I'm not convinced that the boys ever really liked each other when Tord was around. At the very least they never hugged, and Tom and Tord especially were never exactly close. One need not look any further than the opening credits of the end to tell you everything you need to know about Tord's character and the boys' relationship to one another prior to his departure. There's the time they all went to hell, on Tord's suggestion, where Tom spent the majority of the episode separated from everybody else and nobody seemed to care. They certainly don't seem to care very much in this photo. Next there's Spares, funnily enough, where Tom was shown to get on Tord's nerves, was repeatedly thrown away, and was finally replaced by a Matt clone. There's a couple of images that show everyone on even footing, they were friends after all, but one of those episodes is Zombie Attack, which ends with Tom getting attacked by a zombified Tord. Yet another instance of Tord trying to kill his friends. Plus that episode has plenty more instances where nobody seems to like each other. There's Tord's Adventure, that episode which is entirely Tord trying to kill Ed, and there's Dudette Next Door, the episode which is entirely Tord and Ed trying to kill each other. There's an image of Ruined, an episode where Tom and Matt seem to actively dislike Tord and nobody cares much for each other's safety and well-being. And finally there's this image. If you don't recognize it, it's the picture that was on Ed's bedside table in Zombie Attack 3. And do you know what Tom does to Tord in that episode? Here's the ghost of Tord, and here's Tom. Yeah, he shoots Tord in the face. Actually, do you remember why Tord is a ghost here? In the episode before that, Zombie Attack 2, Tord is already a zombie, as established, and joins forces with Ed to reach the Necronomicon. And what are Matt and Tom trying to do throughout the episode? Trying to get there before them. The boys spend the entire episode trying to stop one another from achieving their goals, and in the very next episode, Tom shoots Tord in the face. Obviously, none of that really matters to the story. Everybody dies at the end of those zombie episodes, so there's no real reason to try and fit it all into the timeline. But from a character perspective, I find it quite revealing. These opening credits were designed to fill the audience in on Tord's character and celebrate the past. These are some of the most iconic moments from some of the most iconic episodes that Tord ever appeared in. And all the characters hated each other. If you want my take on why Tord might feel out of character in this episode, I think it's because everybody else has changed. And it's Tord who stayed the same. Tord left at a time when the boys were openly hostile to one another. They were still friends and housemates who had adventures together, but it was rare for them to act with any real camaraderie outside of life or death situations. They teased each other, they hit each other, they annoyed each other, and they fought each other. That's the show that Tord left behind, but by the time of the end, Ed, Matt, and Tom had grown and changed and could basically tolerate one another's existence. There was still some antagonism there, I hope there always will be. Some of the best and funniest moments are when there's a bit of teasing involved, but everyone is less mean than they were, if nothing else. Tord never got that message. He was absent for all of those years of development, and as a result, he never grew up. He's playing the same tricks he always played, bullying his friends in the same way they used to bully one another, getting away with the same behavior that used to pass as acceptable friendship. Just like old times. Tord, in the end, does not act any different to how he did in the classic era. To say otherwise, I think, would be a mischaracterization. He's acting just like he did when they were friends, when the boys actively sought to harm one another, even though everyone else has grown up and learned to get along. If you dislike the end because of the way Tord is written, I hope that I've given you a new perspective. So we've covered the evidence in favour of Tord being a clone and found that it's not particularly definitive, but that's okay. So long as there's nothing disproving the theory outright, it could still be true. Well, see, here's the thing. Reasons why Tord cannot be a clone. Reason number 1, the lab is in Tord's old room. Tord needs access to Tom's room in order to retrieve his mech suit because it's Tord's old room. He was going to do that by picking the lock, but he was caught in the act, so he has to drive Tom out before he can get any chance at it. If you accept that Tord is, well, Tord, then this makes perfect sense. Tord built this secret room at some point before he left, and now he's coming back to retrieve something he left behind. Assume that he's a clone, and things get a little more tricky. You'd have to come up with an explanation for why the clone was building the lab in the eddsworld house when he could build it anywhere else. Then you need to explain how and why the clone was sneaking into the house to work on the robot and then tell Ed he was moving back in before nicking it. You can maybe argue that the real Tord built the lab before he left and the clone is just trying to steal it, but at that point just accept that the real Tord is the kind of guy with the capacity to take over the world. Especially when you consider reason number 2, literally everything inside the lab. There's Tord's hat, which he wore in Moving Targets. There's access to the tank, also from Moving Targets. And there's this poster on the wall, which is very Tord. On the gun rack, there's the knife and spiked bat from this image, as well as the grenades and handgun he used in Spares. And on this, laundry rack, he's missing some knives and handguns, just like the ones he packed with him when he left. This room belongs to Tord. Meanwhile, there are photos on the wall of Tord and his cronies dressed in Red Army attire, and on this gun rack he's missing a gun that looks like the one he held in his wanted poster. This is a room that was built by Tord when he was already the Red Leader. There's also the Red Leader logo by the lever, which leads us on to reason number 3, literally everything outside the lab. The Red Leader logo in Tord's room appears all across the Legacy, associated with these guys who he's implied to be fighting alongside. Here's the logo in Tord's room, here's the logo next to one of his cronies. Here they are on a plane with the same logo and this number plate. Here's that number plate on Tord's car. Here's Tord's car being driven by Paul. Here's Paul on Tord's wanted poster. It all comes back to Tord, the real Tord, with links to the past, present, and future of being the Red Leader. Reason number 4. The theory ruins the end. Yeah, so here's the thing about the clone theory, the real reason I decided to make this video. I've heard it said before that a good fan theory reinforces the themes of a work. It gives you a new way to experience the story and a new respect for what the storyteller was trying to achieve. Even if the theory itself is far-fetched and clearly not what the creator had in mind, discussing it can help you appreciate the work on its own merits. I feel that the clone theory does the opposite. It denies Tord the character growth assigned to him, strips away creator intentions, and makes the characters and world less interesting. Since 2008, the year the character left, Ed and Tom wanted to bring Tord back as a villain in a series they were working on together. That was always going to be the plan. Combine that with years of fans asking why Tord left and begging for him to come back, the return was as crowd-pleasing as it was subversive. Remember all that stuff I said about Tord acting completely in character yet being kind of a jerk? I have a feeling that was at least a little bit intentional. The promotional teaser poster came with the tagline, "Be careful what you wish for," while the montage of Tom getting beaten up has the lyrics, "Wishes do come true, best friends forever." If you'd been someone wishing that Tord would come back, well, here he is, you get your wish. He came back exactly as he was, warts and all. Claiming that Tord is a clone is to argue that Tord was never the kind of person who would try to kill his friends, even though he never did a single nice thing to anybody unless it was an act of self-preservation or a violent outburst. To say that the real Tord is still out there is to hold on to a hope that he'll come back, and this time he won't be the violent criminal he's proven himself to be again and again and again, especially because he doesn't get closure. In much the same way fans were left without a satisfying reason for his departure, Tord's final note is one of failure. That's what makes the scene on the hill so perfect. I totally believe that Tord regrets what he did here. He looks distraught. He's not an evil supervillain, but he doesn't get a redemption arc. This was his mistake, and he just has to live with it. I've made a point before about how you're allowed to interpret media in whatever way brings you the most joy, so I'm certainly not going to tell you what to think. If you can only watch the end thinking that Tord has to be a clone, then legitimately all power to you. As for me, I've come to accept Tord for who he is, for who he always was, and stop looking at the past through rose-red tinted glasses.
Hasta pronto, viejos amigos. Yo no soy tu amigo.
Hey Ed, it's Matt here. I just wanted to give you an update on all the Eddsworld stuff that we've been working on. We've got 2 animations in production. We've also been working on the Style Guide. That's been a very long project, but it's now wrapping up. Comic arc for Eddsworld Noir, because we want to do more comics. We want to do comic books. Myself and Andy have been working hard on comic books. Andy has a background in comic books himself. And we're working on some Eddsworld comic books, which allows us to do more stories without the pipeline of animation, which can be very slow. People have asked us if Toaster Brain is ever coming back, and answer is yes, but we are working on a more complete version that has annotations and work in progress drawings and just more things that are Ed specific. So yeah, the definitive edition of Toaster Brains as well. So stay tuned for that. Look forward to working on everything over the next year.